to welcome you to October's morning tea meeting. Today we are going to talk about PACOP and how it was developed and its history, so that you have a little bit of an understanding of the evidence and the base that sits behind the PACOP program. Presenting with me is one of the PACOP Improvement Facilitators, Nat Joseph. And Natalie, thank you for getting up early. Natalie is based in Perth. But
Good morning. Good morning, Claire.
Thank you for joining us so early.
How is the weather on the East Coast this morning?
Well, Nat, as you can see, I'm not wearing sleeves. It's beautiful.
You're not?
Here, so
that is a good sign.
It is a good sign, and there's this big yellow thing in the sky. I believe it's the sun.
Wow.
Very
that
exciting.
Sounds very promising.
Perth?
And it's a lovely day in Perth. It is sunny and blue sky. And yeah, we have escaped all your crazy weather over there. So we are pretty lucky.
Well, welcome and thank you for joining us. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on all across Australia. We acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the traditional custodians of the lands we're meeting on. Wherever we are, we wish to pay our respects to the elders, past, present, emerging and future. I'd just like to acknowledge that today I'm in Lake Macquarie in New South Wales, and this is the traditional lands of the Awabakal people. Nat, what about you?
I would thank you for that welcome to country. I would like to echo that on behalf of Perth, and we are on behalf of the Whadjuk Noongar people.
Lovely. And of course, PACOP is based in Wollongong, which is the traditional lands of the Darawal people. So we would just like to honour them and acknowledge their leaders and the contribution that they have made to the ongoing state of the land that we are meeting on today. So the format for our meeting today is that Nat is going to ask questions about the background of PACOP, and of course we invite questions from you as the audience as we go along, and we will endeavour to answer those during the discussion. So I'm going to hand over to you, Nat. What is it that you want to know specifically?
Thank you, Claire. I am looking forward to this opportunity to be the interviewer of my boss, as it were. So no, not really. We really just are really happy to be able to tell you about how we got to where we are today, because it has been a bit of a process getting PACOP finalised, and we're just so excited we are now ready to roll out everywhere. So that's really the background of today. So I'm gonna ask Claire questions, and she's gonna answer them. And hopefully by the end of the presentation, you will have a pretty good understanding of how PACOP came to be. And of course, any questions we would welcome. So Claire, first question, how did PACOP begin? Like how did it even start?
So PACOP has really been the brainchild of a group sitting in the University of Wollongong called the Australian Health Services Research Institute. And within ASRI, there are a number of outcome centres. One is about rehabilitation, one is about pain, and one, of course, is the palliative care outcomes collaboration. PCOC is a really mature outcome centre, and it looks at the aims to improve the outcomes for people who are being cared for in specialist palliative care services. Now, I was the chief investigator for PCOC for 10 or more years, and we as a group would look at what was happening in the sector and the numbers of people who are dying and where they're dying in Australia. And one of the underpinning precepts of palliative care is that irrespective of where somebody is dying, people have a right to the best optimal palliative and end-of-life care. And when you look at the people who are dying in Australia, 60,000 of those people who die each year are resident or living in aged care facilities. Whether they die in those aged care facilities or in a hospital or another setting, we're unsure about the proportion who come from those different settings. But irrespective, those people are entitled to optimal end-of-life care. So how the understanding was, well, aged care is different to palliative care. So, we're focusing on palliative care. So as we have moved on in time, we recognise the importance of palliative care in the aged care sector and at residential aged care setting in particular. And so in 2018 and 19, PCOC approached the Wicking Foundation for funds to be able to modify and trial the PCOC program in the aged care sector. So even though PCOC had been going since 2005, this was the first attempt to shift that over into specifically the aged care sector. But one of the things that sits behind that is the huge improvements that have happened in the way that palliative care is delivered in that 17 years that PCOC is going. And that's one of the things that's really inspired me to be part of the PACOP program, is seeing the huge improvements that have happened in the specialist palliative care sector. And to a degree, the understanding and of how we use data and assessments to improve care in palliative care, we've had to grow that in the palliative care sector. And I think it's a great opportunity to be able to see and use that same methodology in the aged care homes as we move forward.
So I know, Claire, just for the purposes of people watching, that trial became known as the PCOC Wicking program, and that, of course, is, if you hear about PCOC Wicking, I know some services are familiar with it because they participated. It's really because we got the funds from the Wicking Trust to run the trial. So what would you say, Claire? What were the main learnings or the main things that came out of that PCOC Wicking trial? The pilot program, as it was.
Yes. So as you rightly say, Nat, that was a trial, and we did an evaluation, or ASRI was involved in a broader evaluation of PACOP, the PCOC Wicking model. And we had a lot of feedback that was really, really helpful. I mean, in the formal evaluation, we sort of identified concepts that, the aged care homes needed to be receptive and ready for change. They need a model to guide that change. There need to be adequate resources in the aged care homes, of course, and that the staff needed to have the skills or be able to develop the skills to implement it. We needed to make sure that we, as a group, were having really good engagement with the aged care homes, and that they had a really good understanding of what PACOP or the PCOC Wicking model was at that time to be able to implement it. There needed to be support systems in place to continually support the aged care homes, and there needed to be a good underpinning evidence behind what we were doing. And we needed to be able to demonstrate the benefits of the program. But having been involved in the PCOC Wicking trial, a couple of take-home messages that I had from aged care homes were that if the aged care home received the education around and understood how to deliver the PACOP program, and that they included that education that all staff needed to understand how it worked, then that was a really good motivator for the program to work. And the other one was just being willing to, once the education and the systems were in place, take the jump and start using it. We found that those aged care homes that did that are still involved in PACOP to this day. And some of the feedback that we received from care workers when we made sure that they were part of this team and providing feedback, their response was, we have a voice to make sure that residents are being understood. So they have a systematic way to help residents identify their concerns and problems, and they have a framework for reporting up to their supervisors that is consistent across all aged care homes who are part of PACOP.
And that was one of the most important things we found, wasn't it? Because there is really key differences between palliative care settings and aged care homes, and we really had to, we identified, of course, those differences, because in knowing what those key differences are, that enabled us to develop the final program of PACOP. Did you want to run through, for the purposes of everyone, really what the main differences are between the models of care in the aged care residential care homes and palliative care service?
Yeah, there are huge differences, and that we needed to recognise those really well when we were modifying PCOC Wicking into the PACOP program. And they were things that in specialist palliative care, we know that the person needs palliative care because that's why they were admitted.
We already know it. That's why, exactly.
Aged care, the concept that somebody is going into aged care because they need palliative care, that's not appropriate. So there needs to be systems in place to be able to identify those people who are deteriorating and benefit from it.
I mean, even in specialist palliative care services versus aged care, you know, of course, there's the huge difference in resourcing. I mean, you know, in a clinical setting, of course, you have, you know, like the nurse to patient ratio is so vastly different to aged care, where you may have one registered nurse or clinical nurse to 40 plus residents.
Yes.
I mean, that alone is, you know, that is such a massive difference that really impacted where we landed with development of the program, isn't it?
That's right, and that's right, and that's one of the reasons why it was so important that we engaged and made sure that care workers were part of this model. They know their residents; they are the ones who are there with the residents all the time. So we needed to make sure that we could utilise that. The other things is the disease profile of people in specialist palliative care compared to residential aged care. In specialist palliative care, we still have a majority of people who are dying with a malignancy of some sort. It's still around 70 or plus%. And other chronic diseases are now slowly being part of the PCOP program and palliative care services. But in your residential aged care facilities, it is the majority of people have advanced chronic illnesses and largely mobility issues as well. In terms of delivering care in specialist palliative care services, they have doctors and nurses who are available 24/7.
And a drug room fully stocked.
And a drug room.
And I mention that because, you know, as someone who has worked in aged care for years, that is a huge factor when you are delivering palliative care. You need to be prepared ahead of time.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And that's one of the things that is key to PACOP is that taking the identifying of dying from being, or the need for palliative care from the immediate dying phase. So, you know, the terminal phase, and bringing it back downstream so that we are identifying people early and they are, we're looking at being able to address their concerns proactively. We're putting in place plans for the eventuality that the person will deteriorate. And that includes access to medications. And equipment. And it means that, you know, the GP doesn't get the emergency call, because I have worked in aged care as well. The emergency call at 8 o'clock on a Friday evening, it means that we've been thinking about this in advance.
Yeah, and that's exactly right, Claire. And I think what PACOP does really is it just puts in place a framework whereby people are started to be screened for palliative need from admission. Yes. So right from the very beginning, that
and nobody misses out as a result.
That's right. So that consistent, regular screening for palliative need, so that we can pick it up early, we can put things into place, and like we've just been talking about, we can have all the stuff ready for when it's really needed. We can have equipment, we can have medications, the doctors have already had their discussions, and of course, most importantly, the family and the resident get the chance to tell us what's important to them, because we're giving them that time.
Yeah, that's really important, yes.
So we did land at 2 parts to the final program. I don't know if we really have time to talk about that in detail this morning, Claire. Do you think maybe we'll just talk overall about?
I think overall, yes.
Yeah.
So we have made a number of continuing changes to what PCOP Wicking looked like to what PACOP looks like now. So we know that in residential aged care homes, there are specialist palliative care staff coming into those sites, and they would recognise the assessment tools from their PCOC assessments that they do. So they will be able to still coming into the aged care homes and using the PCOC assessments when they do assessments of residents in the aged care home. But the aged care home themselves will use the PACOP program, and the PACOP program was developed into 2 modules. So it means that the first module we call the profile collection. It is routine regular assessment of all residents once every 3 months. or when you do your resident of the day process. And it means then that we are doing a comprehensive assessment of the palliative care needs of all of the residents so that we don't miss anybody. Subsequently, so at that time when an aged care home implements the profile collection, they are learning how to use the tools and learning about systematic routine assessment and how to identify people who need palliative care. The other component is the outcomes collection. And we know that some aged care homes, they are really keen and they want to commence the profile and the outcomes collection together. The outcomes collection is where the way that we care for people who need palliative care. And they are assessed on a more regular basis. And we teach the aged care homes then how to use the assessment and response protocol. So if this is what's happening with your resident, these are the things that you would need to consider to address those needs and problems and concerns.
Yeah. And so, Claire, really what I'm hearing from you is there is a part A and a part B to the program. Part A being the profile where everyone is screened every 3 months to pick up need. And then part B is the outcomes collection where you have identified palliative need. Then we can start with, more frequent assessment and response so that we can make sure the care plan is accommodating their needs on, on a daily / weekly basis, accommodating for change as they arise.
And an aged care home that has fully implemented PACOP will have the profile collection, part A, working side by side with the outcomes collection. So yeah, implementation is both. One of the other things, sorry, Nat,
you go, Claire. No, you go, Claire.
So one of the other really important things that we did was in the initial pilot we were looking at, we used the global question, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody died in 12 months. We've actually reduced that to we wouldn't be surprised if a resident died within the next 3 months, along with the symptom assessment to identify those people who need palliative care. We did that in response to the feedback that we had from the aged care homes, because this, aged care is like, we wouldn't be surprised really if any of our residents died in the next 12 months. That's the nature of aged care, and it's the length of stay is becoming increasingly shortened. So we were trying to target those people who really need the additional input of a palliative care approach to
that focused
palliative
care, and that's what we use to identify people to go into the outcomes part of the program. That's the part B of the program.
Yeah, but when we're doing the 3 monthly profile assessment, we know that people don't regulate the deterioration according to our timetable, and sometimes there's a deterioration that aged care homes are concerned about, staff are concerned about, and we've developed a tool called the deteriorating resident tool that they can just take off the shelf at any point and do an assessment to see, does this person really need palliative care, and to help them make decisions about the focus of their management in the future. So and we've developed that directly in response to the feedback that we've had from aged care.
And that's a brilliant form.
Successful. Yes.
Yeah, that is a brilliant form, because we say anytime you're concerned about a resident for any reason, grab that tool, quickly do your assessment, and that will help guide you to what to do next. So, at the end of that assessment, you might say, well, no, they don't have palliative need. So you can put that to one side, and work out what else needs to be done, or look, based on this, actually it looks like they do have palliative need, so let's move forward from there. So it's a really valuable tool. How do services become involved in PACOP? I'm mindful of the time, Claire, and I know you and I could talk all day, but if you want to become involved in PACOP, because it is really quite new, we've only just started rolling it out nationally in the last few months. If services want to be involved, what do they do about that?
So we have a general inquiry email address, and we have a website with an inquiry page on it, or you can get, there's our telephone number on that web page. Contact us. Zoe is going to put up the last a slide with those contact details so that you can see those. So just make contact with us. And one of our team will get back to you right away.
Yeah, and I mean, we just should really point out that we are funded by the Australian Department of Health. So it is free for services to participate,
right.
and all the support we will give you ongoing, and that's to do with like training, implementation, embedding, and ongoing support for any aged care home that signs up with PACOP is all free. So we are so excited that we're off and running, and you know, as this morning tea talk talks about, this is about from beginning to the launch, and our launch is coming up, isn't it, Claire?
Yes.
Our official launch. Claire, what do you want to tell everyone about that?
So if you are interested in being part of our official launch, we are officially launching the program and moving out and making it much more broadly available to aged care homes starting on the 15th of November. We will be having a morning tea and visitors, some very special guests to be part of that official launch of the program. If you would like to be part of that, you're more than welcome. Just email us on the email address at the bottom of the slide that you can see now.
Yeah, and I think that's a wrap, Claire. I think we're out of time.
Nat. Thank you, everybody who attended. Thank you, Zoe, for your help. Nat, thank you very much for getting up early in Perth. We really appreciate it.
That's my pleasure. Always great to share a cup of coffee with the team and have a chat. So hopefully, guys, you'll subscribe for our morning tea talks, because we have them every month, and we'd just love for you to join informal chat and just find out more about PACOP as we go along.
Thank you very much, and goodbye for now.
Bye-bye.